Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening for our virtual genealogy program, Researching Your Revolutionary War Ancestor. Hi, I'm Pam Taylor, manager of the Harford County Public Library's Joppa branch. This performance is being recorded and will be available along with a handout at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page for the next 4 weeks. Now let's get on with the show. We're thrilled to have Craig R. Scott with us this evening for one of our special America 250 virtual genealogy programs this summer that will aid in finding your American Revolutionary Patriot. Craig, M.A., C.G., F.U.G.A., is the president and CEO of Heritage Books Incorporated, a genealogical publishing firm with over 10,000 titles in print. A professional genealogical and historical researcher for more than 40 years, he specializes in records of the National Archives, especially those that relate to the military. He has coordinated military tracks at IGHR, SLIG, and GRIP in the last years past. He is currently the coordinator of the SLIG Consultation track, helping students solve their brickwall problems. Craig will be using a PowerPoint during his presentation this evening, and you can adjust what you're seeing on your screen by using the screen view in Zoom. Please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom, and at the end of the show, I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. And we'd really appreciate if you take time to complete the quick survey that comes right into the credits. We use your input to choose topics for our virtual genealogy program, so it's time well spent and it takes just a moment. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Craig R. Scott.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So let me share my screen and
Certainly.
we'll go races. So I believe everybody can see that.
Yep, you got it. Have a good show.
Thank you so much. So today we're going to talk about the Revolutionary War, but I guess you all knew that before we started. We're going to cover pretty much cradle to grave of a soldier. We're going to recognize that the information I'm going to talk about tonight pretty much applies to the other colonies, but each colony or state has its own nuance. There are differences, but they're pretty minor with what we're going to talk about. The research methodology that we're going to talk about tonight also will apply to pretty much every war prior to World War I, with, again, nuances. And this is a talk that I have given to the Maryland Genealogical Society and Maryland Public Radio and the New Hampshire Genealogical Society and lots of other genealogical societies using different soldiers for the most part. And I really enjoy putting together these case studies that deal with the revolution. So
Craig,
let's get started.
I want to just pause for a moment. Somebody in the audience said they had trouble hearing you. So if you could speak up, that would probably be preferable. Thank you.
Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is identify a possible Revolutionary War soldier. And you're all going to pull out your pedigree charts, your Enentofels, and you're going to be able to point directly to somebody who is a Revolutionary War soldier or not. What we want to do is to look for male ancestors born after about 1720 and before 1770. The reason I say before 1770 is my third great-grandfather was described in Posey County, Indiana. Samuel Thomas Scott was his name, as a Revolutionary War soldier. They threw a parade for him as the last surviving Revolutionary War soldier in 1847 there. Unfortunately, he was born in 1771, and he was a War of 1812 soldier, and pretty much, I guess, a con man and a cabinet maker. You pretty much want to focus on those born between 1745 and 1765. The kinds of information that you want to have, and I'm not saying that you have to have all this before you begin, but basically before you begin doing military research, you should have done all the genealogical research that you could have done in regards to census and those kind of things ahead of time. It would be very worthwhile to know the name of the individual. Now, I've had people come to me and say, I want you to find my Revolutionary War ancestor so I can join the SAR, so I can join the DAR. And I'll go, okay, what's his name? No, Craig, you don't understand. I want you to find my Revolutionary War ancestor. I don't know his name. you want to know your guy's name. And when I say guy, there are females involved in this also. There are some females who passed as males. There are some females who have pensions, and this all applies to them too. You want to know their full name. You want to know their year of birth, so you know their age. You want to know their place of birth, because some Revolutionary War records include place of birth. You want to know where they lived before, because that will determine pretty much who they join with to fight in the Revolution. You want to know during. You want to know if they could get home or not on furlough. And you also want to know where they are after the conflict because of pensions and bounty land. Also, you want to know the name of the spouse, because generally the name of the spouse and the year of birth will allow you to differentiate one John Smith from another. And also not on this list, but very important, is you want to know the name of at least one child. Otherwise, why are you looking at this person? So the person that we're going to talk about tonight is Lawrence Huddle. I don't know when he was born. I don't know where he was born. I know that he was in Maryland before the conflict. And I know that his spouse's name is Nancy, and that's about the best that I can do at this point. Always. The first place that I'm going to go for clues, not for reality, not for truth, but for clues, is Find a Grave. And when I go to Find a Grave, I find Lawrence. And it says that he was a corporal. So we want to catalog that away. And that he was born in 1758 in Georgetown, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. That's near you all, except it's not. And that he dies in 1848 in the city of Alexandria. And he's buried in St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery in Alexandria. So I'm going to go find out where Georgetown is in Anne Arundel County. Unfortunately, there is no Georgetown in Anne Arundel County, at least not today. But there is an East Georgetown Elementary School, so there might be something there in the past somewhere. But there is a Georgetown in northeastern Kent County that was laid out in 1736. So I'm thinking maybe Find a Grave might have made a mistake. I don't know yet, but I'm keeping my options open about Anne Arundel, and I'm also keeping my options open about Kent. Now, the other thing I always do with Find a Grave is I go and look at the cemetery. I look for everybody of the same name in the cemetery, those kind of things. I want to know what the history of the cemetery is. It may be that this cemetery was built after this guy dies, and why is he buried there? Where did he move from? That kind of thing. You also want to see if the cemetery has a website. And in fact, the Basilica of St. Mary in Alexandria does in fact have a website that actually mentions Lawrence, because he's a Revolutionary War hero, they believe. And so he's mentioned on their website. So there's a bio about him on their website. Now, at the same time that I'm looking at this cemetery, I am finding his wife, Anne Nancy Wheeler. And she's born in Georgetown, Kent County, Maryland. Well, that helps me sort of resolve the Anne Arundel County issue. And she dies in 1863 in Alexandria. And she also is buried in St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery. There's no mention of her in the bio of Lawrence Hurdle on the website. What a shame. Now, the other thing that I like very much about Find a Grave, and again, these are clues. These are not reality. These are just clues, is I find the names of the parents. I find if there were other spouses, and I find the names of children. And I especially like those names of children that have tombstones, but they don't have to. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go find census records, and I'm going to look for him specifically in the 1840 census, because Revolutionary War soldiers are identified in the 1840 census. Unfortunately, remember, he died in 1838, but I'm still going to do the census research for the family, and I find that his wife Nancy is in the household of Levi Hurdle in the 1850 census. And remember that Levi, of course you wouldn't remember, but I just showed you a slide with Levi's name on it. There's also an Anne Hurdle that is also present in this family. And she's of the right age to be a sibling of Levi. And in fact, going back to the finding grade piece. Yep, there she is. Now, he dies in 1838. So I'm going to give you a sample of what an 1840 looks like. And I guess my brain isn't working because there he is in the 1840 census at age 81. Do you see him? Age 81. Now, this 1840 census is also on Ancestry as a census, but it's also on Ancestry as a book, Pensioners of 1840. And you see that Lawrence Hurdle is the head of household in the Lawrence Hurdle household in 1840. So we have him as a Revolutionary War soldier. Now, in the book, he's living in the District of Columbia here, but Maryland also has several entries. This is Prince George's County. So you want to look on Ancestry or in the book of the 1840 Revolutionary Pensioners of 1840 to get information about an individual. Now, here we see that he is 81 years old. I don't have my glasses on. 81 years old. So he's an old man. So what answers do we have so far? Always keep track of what answers you have, because they will create a path for you to go forward. So we've got his name. He's 81 in 1840. He's born about 1759, according to that calculation. He's in Georgetown, Kent County, Maryland, place of birth, probably. That's where his wife is born. And after the conflict, we know he's in Alexandria, Virginia, before we knew he was in Maryland. And the name of his spouse is now Nancy Wheeler. And we know he has Revolutionary War service based on the 1840 census. So we then, having done the census research, are then going to go to dar.org. And we're going to plug his name in the ancestor search. And we're going to see that he is a private service from Maryland, born 1758 in Maryland, died 1848, I misspoke, Alexandria County, Virginia. And he and she have pensions. That's what the S asterisk W means. If it just was S and a number, he had a pension. That S stands for survivor. It does not stand for soldier, because there are pensioners who were not soldiers. And then the W stands for widow. There may be an R there that stands for rejected. There may be an M there that stands for minor. We see that the service source of Captain John Quartz Jones and Colonel John Gunby in the 7th Maryland Regiment. You have to combine the 7th Regiment with a service from Maryland. We see that that service was established in the pensions, and we see that he has a bounty land warrant of certificate number 1 of 60 acres under the Act of 1855. Here we have a residence in Maryland of Montgomery County. So he goes from Kent to Montgomery. So we now know that he's actually been in 3 places. We know that he's been in DC in 1840, but DC in 1840 included Alexandria, Virginia until 1847. So you have to be aware of the boundary lines. And we also know he was in Montgomery County. Now, we also will have access through dar.org of children. And unfortunately, not too many people have joined the DAR, 2 under this person, and they all descended from the same person, Mary, who married James Monroe. And you can see these 2 people's national numbers in the descendant search. The other thing you're going to do is push on those red buttons, and you're going to get a descendants list. And I especially appreciate these descendants lists because they basically create a pedigree. Now, it might not be my pedigree. It might not connect to me at all, except at the soldier, because I descend from a different child, but I still want that information because these are the people that will tell me about my guy. Now we want to have a look at the children. We know of one from the DAR, Sereno with wife James Monroe, and we know of 2 from the 1850 census, Levi and Ann Nancy. So we have all these others according to finding grade. So there's a lot of stuff that we can play with. It's very important whenever you're doing genealogy research to examine all of the siblings, examine all of the grandchildren, examine all of the children. Don't just do straight shot genealogy, because these people all know you're a guy and you don't. And plus, we've got a marriage there that we have to track down on the female side, and a bunch of things we have to track down anyway if we're going to do that. So where are we at in the learning curve? Well, born 1758, 1759, died 1848. He's been in Montgomery County, Maryland. He's been in Alexandria, Virginia, which is actually DC, in 1840, but not in 1848, because it changes in 1847. We know both he and she got a pension, and we know he had service in the 7th Maryland, and we know his wife's name. So now we're going to do a literature search. And the first place in Maryland that I'm going to go is Maryland Militia in the Revolutionary War. And there I did find that he was in Montgomery County. It didn't provide me any new information. The next place I'm going to go, because here I found him in Montgomery County, and I have him in Montgomery County in the DAR, is I'm going to go to Revolutionary Patriots in Montgomery County, Maryland, by Hank Peden. Now, we have in Maryland a book for every county except Allegheny and Garrett. So there's no excuse not to look at these, and look how much information there is on Lawrence. We now have the name of the captain, Edward Burgess. We know he was from the lower district of Frederick County, which is now Montgomery County. We know he was in the 6th Company of the Lower Battalion in the militia. We know he was in the 7th Maryland Line. We knew that before. We didn't know he took an oath of allegiance. We also don't yet know when he applied for a pension, just that he got one. We know that he had sons and daughters. We don't necessarily know their names. We know that Nancy, in fact, applied for a pension, but she states in her pension something we evidently haven't learned yet, that she's the daughter of Leonard Wheeler, and that she married Lawrence in 1790 or 93. I usually remember what year I got married, in the home of her father. And she has an uncle named Noble Hurdle of Washington, D.C. And when Lawrence died and those kind of things. So we now are able to add a little bit more to what we know. But what we have in all of this, buried in all of this, are sources. So Hank has done us the work of going to identify the sources and summarize what's there, but we want to go to the actual sources themselves. So the D is Archives of Maryland, the M is Clements Maryland Militia, we already looked there. The T's are various volumes of unpublished Revolutionary Records of Maryland. L is Carruthers, 9,000 men who took the oath of allegiance. And P is Virgil White, Genealogical Abstracts of the Revolutionary War Pension Files. We're going to skip the P because we're eventually going to go fold 3 and look at the actual pension. So we don't need a summary of the pension other than what's in the pension. So the D24 leads us to the muster rolls of Maryland troops in the American Revolution. And he's got information there on page 216. It says 7th Maryland Regiment. We knew that, private. It gives us some dates, and then it goes to present. Now, there are additional entries, because when you go to these books, you're not going to rely on Peden alone. When you look in the book, you're going to look in the index, and you're going to find several other entries that Peden didn't find necessary to put in what he had about Lawrence. He had a lot about Lawrence. He didn't probably need this stuff for what he was accomplishing, but you will want to have this stuff for what you're accomplishing. Because what's cool here is on page 390, it says that he's in the muster roll of the late Captain Beatty's company under the command of Lieutenant Lamar in the 1st Maryland Regiment, serving basically under General Smallwood, which is not anywhere in what we've seen so far. And then the rest has to do with pay that's due, and that allows you to create some sort of time frame. Now, going to the next one, Revolutionary Records of Maryland, the Worshipful Joseph Wilson's returns of January 1778, on page 39 showed Lawrence Hurdle taking the oath of affirmation of fidelity and support to the state of Maryland. Now, there are public claims in Maryland, public service records. Unfortunately, there's nothing found for him there, but it's likely there's nothing found because he served through the war. for individuals who you can't find service for, this would be the first place that you would look. Now, the U.S. Maryland Revolutionary War records are on fold 3, 1750 to 1800. And in fact, he has a few entries. But in fact, when you look at all those entries, these are all things that we already know. Monmouth County, Maryland, private in 1790, born about 1758, part of the Maryland line. Now, the Maryland line is part of the Continental Army. We have various kinds of units in the Revolution. We have Continental. Now, there are Continental units that are pure Continental. They're largely in New England in the beginning of the war. Then there are Continental that are raised from states, and they serve through the war. Then there are militia, and they basically serve in the state, but the militia is known to leave the state. In Maryland, we have something called the flying camp, which leaves the state. But there's two kinds of militia also. There's the state militia, state regiments, state troops, and then there are county companies. Now, there may be a sufficient number of companies to have a regiment from a county, but that the way things are amalgamated together, that usually doesn't happen. Usually a regiment in the Continental Line is made up from a variety of different counties. They don't all come from the same county, so it's very important to know the names of the captains, of which we've found 2 so far. Now, whenever I'm dealing with the Continental Army, the most thumbed book in my library, 3 feet from me behind my head, you'll see when we are in the Q&A, is Continental Army by Robert K. Wright Jr. He's retired now, but he used to be a historian for the United States Army, and he is the historian for the 116th Regiment in the Blue and Gray Division today. So when we go to the Continental Army book, and this book didn't used to be totally downloadable from Carlisle, military history up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the Military History Center, but it now is. So I would advise you to go and get the PDF that relates to Wright's book on the Continental Army. It's worth having. And here we find out about what the 7th Regiment did. New Jersey, defense of Philadelphia, Philadelphia and Monmouth, defense of the Carolinas. So this gives us some idea about what is going on. The next thing we're going to do is we know we got a pension. Now, I always do the history first, and then I do the pension next, and then I do the compiled military service records after, because I want the pension to confirm the military service, because he had to confirm his military service in order to get a pension. Excuse me. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is look at Christine Rose's book on military pension law, because understanding pension law, at least a little bit in the Revolution, will give you some idea about why your guy got a pension. In order to get a pension, there has to be enabling legislation. Now, it might be a public claim. That happens sometimes, but most times you're going to find people getting pensions under the Act of 1818, which was a Continental Line pension, or under the Act of 1832, which was a militia pension. And there are various acts in between those that sort of round things out. The pensions are on fold 3. The cost of a single pension, to purchase it from the National Archives, where they go and download it off fold 3 for you, is the cost more than the cost of subscribing to fold 3 for an entire year and having access to all the Revolutionary War pensions and a whole bunch of other stuff. So when we look at for his pension, we find that it's Lawrence Hurdle, and in fact, there are 2 spellings of Lawrence's name in the pension. His wife is Nancy, and we see that Nancy got a pension. By looking at this, we couldn't tell whether Lawrence got a pension or not until we looked inside the envelope. We know because of the DAR that he did in fact get a pension. Also on this page is that bounty land information that the DAR took from this place right here. Now, I have seen very few circumstances where what's in the DAR database is not the correct number due to a transposition or an additional number or something like that. So always verify what the DAR has against an actual record. Now, Lawrence, you might have the impression that he has two pensions. He doesn't. What he has is a reference card, and that's what this is. And that basically tells us that if you're looking for a guy named Lawrence Hurdle, Hurdell, look for Lawrence Hurdle, Hurdle. So there may be two or more pensions in envelopes sometimes. There may be a survivor pension, a widow pension, or rejected pension. And that's what we see here is their survivor and widow pension. You want to separate the people and put them in chronological order. Download them from Fold 3 or take your photocopies and pile them up by individual and then set them up chronologically so that you can get a picture. The soldier may be saying one thing and the widow may be saying another. This is the actual pension envelope. It's a trifold. It's what they stored everything in, surrounded by red tape. Basically red tape. Actually, these days it looks like pink tape. Always read what it says there. This says Lawrence Hurdle, private, Maryland line. Remember, on Find a Grave, it says he's a corporal. Anyway, it says private in the pension, and that he got a pension in 1818. Sometimes you'll see a date of death on this document, but you won't find anything anywhere in the pension that will give you information about the date of death, but the date is there. This is a document under the Act of 1820 that you may find in a pension, because in 1820 they decided to throw everybody off the roll who wasn't actually indigent, actually poor. Because in 1818 you were supposed to be indigent, but they didn't define it, so everybody got a pension, pretty much, that could prove service. But in 1820 they didn't have enough money to pay the pensions because of their War of 1812 debt. And they did not have the expectation that so many patriots would apply for a pension. I guess congressmen didn't really know the American people after all. Now, in 1820, they bumped a whole bunch of people off. I don't know about you. I'm a Navy pensioner. If the Congress all of a sudden decided to bump me off the pension or to reduce my pension significantly, and my congressman voted for that, he sure wouldn't get my vote next time around. And your ancestors are just like you, they wouldn't vote for that congressman either. So by 1828, the concept of indigency is totally removed and people are restored, those that are still living are restored to the pension list. You'll find affidavits. I believe you should transcribe them. Fold 3 now has a methodology for transcribing them for you automatically. Trust little, go ahead and look at it, but actually do a comparison between their transcription and what you think the transcription should be before you do anything with it. Basically, this says he's in Montgomery County. Always want to look at the court, where court is taking care of things. And this basically tells us that he was wounded in action at Camden in South Carolina, and adds another captain for us, Richard Anderson. You want to read about battles. The Battle of Camden was not pleasant. In fact, about 2/3 of the Maryland regiments were wiped out at Camden, murdered, basically. If you're interested in a good book on what happened in Camden, there's an excellent book on the life of the Baron de Kalb by John Beeks that talks about the action of Camden and the Baron de Kalb. There also is a pension certificate, and this is what they would have taken with them to move from one place to another. In other words, he moved from the Baltimore office to the Alexandria office, and he did that with paperwork. He may have made an application. In this case here, you see an application for him to do that transfer. And here is where that transfer is approved. Now, in some pension records, there may be a Bible record. Lawrence doesn't have one. This is a Bible record from one of my ancestors. If you were to look at this on microfilm, it would be a photostat. And Fold 3 took it upon themselves to reverse the photostat. And you can see that it's rather difficult to read. When I was a kid, The date was the 2nd of August, 1969. I know this because of some records I found 20 years later in a Civil War pension I know I looked at for the first time then. This is the Bible record of William Brockett of the South Carolina State Troops, and I couldn't read it. The archives technician, when I said, "What can I do? I can't read this," he said, "Well, we'll show you the original." And on that day, my first day in the National Archives, I got to touch a Revolutionary War pension. I couldn't read it either. I touched 2 real Revolutionary War pensions in my life, and neither time was able to read more than I was able to read on either the microfilm or fold 3, although it's always generally easier to read on fold 3, except in the case of Bible records. Now, you might ask what photostat machines existed in 1818 that they would have a Bible record, or 1832 that they would have a Bible record? The answer is that in the 1880s, the Bible record pages were returned to people in the family. And I've been successful in locating in records in the National Archives the addresses to which some of these Bible records were returned. However, what I didn't know when I was a kid was that there was a letter in the file. I do what many of us do often, is I stop too soon. And so there was a letter from the pension office, and letters from the pension office you can believe, because they only put information in there from the pension, which listed all the information in the Bible record, and a statement of his service found in the pension, any information about family that might be found in the pension, those kinds of things. Now, letters too are not something you really want to pay attention to, except the name and address of the person, because these are probably relatives that are looking for information on these people. You might not know these people as relatives. But I take the letters to the pension office with a grain of salt. I once found one that said that Enoch Furr, a soldier I'll be talking about Thursday night at the Thomas Balch Library with their Zoom meeting, said that he was born in France and came to America with Lafayette. The Baron de Kalb came to America with Lafayette. Lafayette did go back, and 43 people came back with him, and only 3 have been identified. But in his pension, Enoch first said he was born in Fauquier County and moved to Loudoun County, Virginia when he was 6. So don't trust these letters too, just treat them as clues. The other thing you want to do on fold 3 is look at all the other pensions that your soldier's name is found in. And there are 3 pensions which Lawrence Hurdle's name is found in: Nehemiah Lowe, Bennett Riley, and Charles Dawkins. Now, you may find that they served with him. You may find that they lived in the area with him. You may find that that there's a widow associated, that the widow needs an affidavit that she has a Revolutionary War pension, or that kind of thing. So from the survivor pension, what did we learn? Well, we know it was the Act of 1818, so he's a Continental Line soldier who served through the war, according to the Act, because he didn't have enough time with the 7th Maryland. And he was wounded at Camden. He moved to Alexandria basically to be near his children, according to the pension. And he's mentioned in the pension files of 3 other pensioners, none of which served with him. So then there's the widow's pension. And here's what her pension looks like. Notice it's not really any different than him. It's a trifle different act. Basically, beginning in 1836, if you were married to the soldier during the Revolution or the term of his enlistment, then you could get a pension in 1836. And over time, the pension years moved all the way up to 1855, when all of a sudden a whole bunch of young women were marrying old men because there no longer was a marriage date requirement. And here's where she says in the pension that she was married between the years 1790 and 1793. We also get that he was married, that he died on the 1st of December of 1848. And we also have a date of, at least she remembered the 20th October. And then here are people coming in and saying that she's the identical person. You had to do this. If if the clerk didn't know you personally, two people that the clerk did know had to come in and say, yeah, that's the right person. And so Levi and his wife Lydia came in and said that that Nancy was who she said she was. And evidently the clerk knew them. And then she transferred from Richmond, Virginia, to the District of Columbia, her pension. So what do we learn? We learned a marriage date, sort of. We learned the maiden name and that it was her first marriage and that she did, in fact, name some children. We also learned about his service, that he was from Frederick, and that part of Frederick would later become Montgomery County, that he was in state troops, and he was not in state troops, but he was in the Continental Army of the 7th Maryland. We learned that he was a private, although Finding Grave says corporal. We also learned John Quartz, but we've seen it spelled a variety of different ways, including Counts and Kuntz. We have Colonel John Gunby. From his pension, we learned he served at Harlem Heights, New York, Camden, South Carolina, and that he was at Yorktown, Virginia. That he did, in fact, survive the war. There's no mention of him being a prisoner, and his marriage to Nancy Wheeler was on 20 October 1790, maybe somewhere between 1790 and 93, and her father's name was Leonard. Now, Gumby's an interesting guy, and I always research the captains and colonels. Gumby was the son of a loyalist, and he was there at the Battle of Camden. And due to our famous General Horatio Gates, who basically exited the battlefield as quickly as he could and headed for Hillsborough, North Carolina, as quickly as he could and abandoned the field. Anyway, I think I said 2/3 were killed. It was actually 2/5 of the Marylanders were killed or wounded, including General DeKalb, who was mortally wounded. John Quartz was from Charles County, Maryland. He was a planner who began as a second lieutenant in the flying camp, and then he served as a captain, and then he eventually will be an aide-de-camp to General William Smallwood. And we've talked about Smallwood at least once, and then I think what happened is John Quartz took Lawrence Hurdle with him when he went to work for William Smallwood. After the war, he served in the Maryland's lower house from Charles County, and then he became a naval officer, and then he was one of the original members of the Society of Cincinnati. So the next thing we're going to do is look at the war service records, the compiled military service records, because we now have service for him, 7th Maryland. And when we look for Lawrence, we find him in the 7th Maryland, 2 years. We know there has to be more because he got something in 1818. And this doesn't make it look like he served through the war. And had he served through the war, he would have been entitled as long as he served. I think it was 6 months. But anyway, we have PR as payroll, MR as muster roll. You want to take these all out, and the numbers on this envelope don't mean anything. They are the serial numbers on the back of the individual cards that are inside this envelope. So this is one from a different guy, from a different, it's not a different guy. Lawrence Hurdle, Captain John Quartz Jones, Company 7th Maryland Regiment. I think I keep forgetting the Jones part. Commanded by, and that's what confused me, and commanded by Colonel John Gumby. So here we have, and we see that those words that go along with that don't mean anything, and one wonders why they're there. So we see certificates for balance of pay in 1799. We show him re-enlisting in 1799, but we don't have a muster roll for him in 1799. And I think that's when he went for General Smallwood. We do find him in a hospital in September of 1778. No furlough is mentioned but one time, and he re-enlisted. And we want to compare all this information with the pension. Now, because we have full 3, there's no excuse not to look at the Revolutionary War rolls that those abstract cards came from. And here you can see Lawrence Hurdle in at least 4 Revolutionary War rolls that are there on full 3 in the 7th Regiment. And then you want to pull these out especially for those people early in the war, because these are basically neighborhoods. People joined together. These were, to use the band of brothers kind of concept. But anyway, you want to know who these people are. And this is especially helpful if your soldier doesn't get a pension. You now have a list of possibilities to look for pensions, because whatever happened to Lawrence happened to every single one of these guys if they were still there in that muster roll. The other thing I want to look at is final payment vouchers. And when we look to Maryland, there are over 500 of them. That means there's over 500 pensioners. There, you can browse them. And when we look for Lawrence, we see that he has one. Now, the components of this are the agency of payment, which in this case is DC. The date of the act is 1838, which is kind of strange because that should be his wife. And the date of payment, fourth quarter 1848, which is after his, which is in the time frame of his death, which was on 1 December 1848. So he may or may not have been paid. He may have gotten paid in October or November. In other words, he could have, in fact, had a remaining payment available to his heirs. And this is a final payment, so we're not going to find anything after the final. Now, the date of the act of 1838 may be the act of 6 April 1838. Otherwise, this is a typo, and it should be 1818, but it may be the act of 6 April 1838, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Now, a last payment is the last time that a pension office pays a pensioner. His was a final payment. A last payment is the pensioner getting money. Now, he could move and not pick up any more pension payments. He could die and no one picked up the final payment, or he doesn't need $8 a month. I doubt that's the case. A guy with $8 cash money is rich. And final payments can be made decades after the soldier dies, but not after 1867. That's when they cut it off. Now, these last and final payments are found in Record Group 217, entry 722. There are some, Georgia and Delaware, that are on Fold 3. But those are the only two states that are on Fold 3. Currently, the National Archives is digitizing these. They've been closed for a couple of years now, and hopefully at some point they will finish digitizing the last and final payments, and they will be more than likely available to everyone on Fold 3. So I can't look at Lawrence Hurdle's last payment, but we can look at other last or final payments. This is from John Head from South Carolina. Comes in a folder. Originally, it was in one of these envelopes, and it was folded and put into one of these envelopes. And there's an affidavit there. There is a payment receipt, those kind of things. There may be, this is where the transfer is. This is where the revolutionary claim might be. This is where you're going to find the actual date of death. And this is the original record where you're going to find the date of death. You may find it on the pension, but not in the pension. You may find it in DAR, but this is probably the original record for the date of death, where the clerk of court is telling you that this person died in his county on this date. Now, some of the last and final payments have been abstracted for some states: Alabama, District of Columbia, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, and Virginia. Allison Trubu Pierce did all but Rhode Island and Pennsylvania. Kay Gunning did Rhode Island and Pennsylvania. And they're a treasure trove of information about Revolutionary War soldiers and their payments. This will lead you to the payment ledgers that are located on Ancestry. The easiest way to get to them, and the way that I get to them, I rarely do a general search on Ancestry unless I'm desperate. I always go to the card catalog and look for things through the card catalog I always know what I'm looking for before I look for it. So use the card catalog. In this case, you just use 1818 to 1872, and it will pop right up. Now, this series of records, 1801 to 1815 and 1818 to 1872, the 1801 to 1850 are invalid pensioners and used to be on Ancestry separate, but now they've combined them together in the same series, but you look at them separately. So when we go and look at Lawrence, we see there's several entries for Lawrence. We see also entries for Nancy. So the ones without Nancy's name are Lawrence's. So we see one for Maryland, 1818 to 1832, then one for the District of Columbia, Washington, for up to 1849, and then we see one for 1818 to 1832 for the District of Columbia. And then we see ones for Nancy, District of Columbia, then Richmond, and for some strange, very strange reason, Wheeling. And I find that very strange. There were two pension offices in Virginia. Richmond was one, and Wheeling was one. And remember, Wheeling is now in West Virginia, but it's a bar joke. You know, what two pension offices were in Virginia after the Revolutionary War? Richmond was one was the other. Very few people will say Wheeling. And then she finally got a clue and went back to the District of Columbia. So she moves all over the place. And what you want to do is track those down, see where they are. Now, these pension ledgers are ugly, but they're very useful from the perspective of they tell me within 6 months where folks are. And they are, there may be information on the tail end that tells me when somebody died, when somebody moved. Like here's the District of Columbia for Lawrence, and you can see in the top, we've got the name, we've got the rank, we've got the monthly allowance, and we've got months. Every March and September, they would in fact be eligible for their pension. First quarter and third quarter. So if you look at Lawrence, this guy's religious. 1-3, 1-3, 1-3, 1-3. Let me blow that up for you. I already did blow it up. 1-3, 1-3, 1-3, 1-3. He screws up once in 1845, where he doesn't pick up his 1844 until 1845. You can see that there, where he picks up his his third quarter, September 1844, actually is what it is, in March, in the first quarter of 1845. And you'll see that little squiggle above that one there in the line, and that little squiggle is the year. So that's how you know it was in the next year. Now, you may encounter cards that don't have an asterisk. These are actually slips of paper, but we call them cards that don't have an asterisk. And if it doesn't have an asterisk, 2/3 of the time, based on Allison Pierce's and my experience in dealing with these, is that in the Revolutionary War pension, you will find a document that looks like this that says under the Act of 6 April 1838. And that's what the last pension, that's why he's being paid under the Act of 1838. So these settled accounts for payment of accrued pensions, the one without asterisks 2/3 of the time, are in Record Group 217, entry 724. And I wrote a book about it. The lost pension settled accounts of 6 April 1838. I wrote the book, and then they pulled all the records off the shelf because people started using them, and they weren't using them before because there wasn't a finding aid. And they flat filed them, and then my book wasn't any good because I didn't include the year. I'm not an archivist, I'm a genealogist, live and learn. So in 2013, I revised it. So now it's the year and the account number. Now, if you only know the account number and the box number, there's a crosswalk in the archives that they can, in fact, you don't have to have the revised edition. You could have the original. And the way that you ask for these is by name of pensioner. And you'll see in the breakout, are you a widow of, CO children of, those you want to see administrator of. You really don't want to see administrator of because it's not going to tell you anything. What pension office it is, what year or box number it might be, and then the account number, and that's how you get to it. Now, if I move through this pretty quickly and a little too fast, I wrote a book about that also, Understanding Revolutionary War and Invalid Pension Ledgers, 1818 to 1872, and the Pension Payment Vouchers They Represent. Because the last and final payments, except for Georgia and Delaware, are not currently available, you want to go back to that ledger and look at the payment vouchers themselves before the last and final and see what they say. They don't always say the same thing that the pension does. But let's talk about some more pensions and state pensions. Lawrence got a Revolutionary War pension from Maryland in 1816, 2 years before he got that federal pension, half pay of a sergeant. Remember, he was a private. So we see him as a corporal in Find a Grave, and we see him as a sergeant in his Maryland pension. And here we can see payments that he got. So let's talk about bounty land for a little bit. There is this book, Military Bounty Land, 1776 to 1855 by Christine Rose. It's out of print, I'm sorry to say. If you can find a copy, buy it. It is the best book in the world on military bounty land concerning the Revolution. It is dense. So here we see bounty land for Lawrence in, again, another pension record. This is a bounty land warrant record card found on fold 3 among the pensions. And here we see 2 pension entries. And this explains something for us that we need to know. Under the Act of 1855, he got 60 acres. But the Act of 1855, I should back up. The 1850 Act, he doesn't get a pension from because Revolutionary War soldiers don't get pensions in 1850. So if you see a Revolutionary War soldier who got a pension, got bounty land rather, in 1850, you know that you have a War of 1812 soldier, and the acreage will tell you 40, 80, 160, 120, 160, will tell you how many months he actually served. 3 months would be 40 acres. However, we see here that he also got in 1790 acreage. So it's likely that he got 60 acres in 1790, federal acres in 1790, and he got 60 acres in 55, which is when Revolutionary War soldiers who pitched a fit because they didn't get land under the 1850 Act, they got it under the Old Man Equalizing Act of 1855. So we go to Ancestry and we look at what they have on bounty land, and they have the Virginia Military District of Ohio and the Military District of Ohio. He would have gotten it from the Military District of Ohio if he got any there. And this is a bounty land map. There's several different bounty land maps out there that relate. This is one I like because it's only missing the Mars Hill grant for Maine for the Massachusetts soldiers. It doesn't contain the Connecticut Western Reserve or the Firelands, but hey, nobody's perfect. But anyway, you can just Google Revolutionary War bounty land map and this will show up. There are also ones that integrate the 1812 bounty land in it also. So at Ancestry, when we look at the bounty land warrants, we find one for what looks like Lawrence. This is why you have to be very careful because you might not find Lawrence if you just typed in Lawrence Hurdle in 1800 Act and a warrant number. And we see here that here he's getting 100 acres. So this 100 acres under the 1800 Act, not that 1790, but an 1800 Act gives him 100 acres. So he has 100 here, and that's why he only had 60 in 1855. You want to go to the Bureau of Land Management and look for him. And here we see Lawrence and his wife, Nancy. So after Lawrence has died, and notice the date, it's 1860, Nancy, who's still living in 1860, according to the 1860 census, assigns her right to the land, the bounty, to Lawrence's bounty land, to Jesse H. Lang, and he will eventually get that land in Wood County, Minnesota or Wisconsin somewhere. And when we look, when we click on it and look at it, we see that information. We see document number one. It was so cool in putting this together to learn that he actually was document number one, and that he got 68.08 acres. And we see that he has militia service in the Revolutionary War. Don't pay any attention to the word militia there. He does have militia service, but this also includes Continental Line, and it also includes Navy and Marine Corps. And the authority is that Scrip Warrant Act of 1855 that we've been talking about. Now, you see this thing called the patent image. That you click that tab and you'll get something like this. Sometimes it's kind of neat. Most times it's not, but that isn't going to prevent me from clicking on it. So there is Revolutionary War state bounty land for all the states except Delaware, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. So Maryland, you have it. And here, when we find Lawrence, there's a book, which is also an Ancestry and also available in book form, Revolutionary War Bounty Land Grants. It's on the other side of the bookcase, 3 feet from. I use it all the time. Here's Lawrence with 50 acres. And this is the 50 that he got from Maryland. So he gets 100 acres in 1790 or 1800. He gets 50 acres, 60 acres in 1855, and he gets 50 acres from the state. So he has a total of 210 acres. Now, don't forget, he assigns that 60 acre, or his wife assigns that 60 acres to someone else. So here we see Maryland Bounty Land. He's a private with the 7th. And here we see he has 225 acres. So we want to track that down. Now, there's additional information that is unique out there relating to Black and Indigenous soldiers. There's also a downloadable Forgotten Soldiers PDF from the DAR, which is excellent. So you want to look in those both those places, in addition to what we talked about tonight, if you're looking for African-American or Indigenous soldiers in the Revolution. There are other sources. We've talked about Revolutionary War state pensions. There's the abstracted grades of Revolutionary War soldiers. Didn't find anything on him there. There's statutes at large in the Library of Congress. And there is the Maryland State Library. So statutes at large you can go to online. This is largely for the public claim side. There are some pensions that one-shot pensions in 38 that basically the Congress said if your heir died in the war, your heirs were entitled to share in something. The only thing I found in statutes at large relating to the hurdles was Noble. Remember Noble, the uncle of Nancy, or the uncle of Lawrence, rather, of DC, had some patents. There are state pensions in one place. You don't have to do just the Maryland book, although I like the Maryland book better because it has a state bounty land in it. But we see that, in fact, he got half pay of a private in 1816, not half pay of a sergeant. So there's a conflict there. I know he's a private, so probably not going to spend any time believing that Mary Meyer's book on the state pensions might be incorrect and that he's a private. Still haven't explained why he's a corporal, but my explanation for that is that he served in the militia after the war and was promoted. You want to wander through Fold 3. Wandering through Fold 3, in my mind, is a great experience, but I'm a military nerd, but there's all kinds of stuff out on Fold 3 that is just so cool that I can't stand myself. There are other references out there. Another that I don't trust as far as I can throw it, but I usually take a look at it, is Benson Lawson's book on the pictorial field book of the Revolution. He also has one for 1812. He has one for the Mexican War. He has one for the Civil War. I like it because of the anecdotes in it. But again, anecdotes are like family lore. You trust them as far as you can throw them. If you've enjoyed tonight, I have several more in-depth looks at the Revolution. There's a 5-series thing on the Revolution out on Legacy Family Tree. I've done about 29 or 30 videos for them on a variety of topics, including Quakers in the Revolution, that kind of thing, or Quakers in military service, if you have interest there, and all kinds of other things. I have a Just Genealogy YouTube channel, which has about 270 rather videos on how to do genealogy. You're welcome to take a look at those. And this is my email. It should be in the handout. We're about to go into questions, and if we don't, in fact, answer your questions tonight, then you're more than welcome to send me an email. Now, I want to also, I forgot to tell the staff at the library about this, but there's a discount code out there for Heritage Books called NGSMPT 20. No 20, but that'll give you a 20% discount at Heritage Books should you like to buy some books. NGSMPT. Did you write that down, Pam? So you can put
I
it in
did not, but I'm sure somebody's going to throw it in the chat for us.
Okay. So did I stop my share?
Yep, you stopped your share, so it's time to come back on screen so we can answer those questions.
Oh, you don't actually have to see me to have me answer questions.
Yeah, there we go. So we do have a few questions and a lot of kudos in the comments section. This is really a great presentation. One of the first ones I can remember that we just focused on Revolutionary War. Great timing, a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to get right into the questions. So the first one is, if you have an ancestor that is listed in a DAR edition, is that sufficient identification? Pension info not needed. That was the crux of it.
So let me make sure I understand. You've got an ancestor in a DAR lineage book or online at dar.org. There's no mention of a pension. They may not have served. If you need to look at what DAR has to say, it could have been public service, could have been civil service, could have been soldier. The eligibility for DAR membership is interesting from the perspective of they're interested in people who contributed to the revolution, not necessarily people alone who served in the revolution. So it's a much wider catchment area that you want to look at, but you definitely want to, if there is a pension, the DAR generally will have identified it and the number should be there.
Okie dokie. So
And let me add one thing.
Yeah, certainly.
Soldiers don't have to have pensions. They don't have to have compiled military service records, and they still can serve. The fact that you can't find a compiled military service record and that you can't find a pension doesn't mean they didn't serve. The first place, do a literature search, do a county literature search, do the county history. County histories usually, not all the time, but usually will identify who the Revolutionary War soldiers from the county are. Another place that you can look is in the 1870s in newspapers. They may identify who the Revolutionary War soldiers were from their county because they've hit the 100th anniversary.
Thank you for all those suggestions, I'm sure. It was Bob who had asked the question. He said they served enough to be part of the bounty land in Rome, New York.
Okay, so if they have bounty land in New York, that means they served in the New York militia. And the New York militia is almost impossible to research because there just aren't that many sources. If they got bounty land in New York, you know they have Revolutionary War service, you just don't know what it is. Now, one of the places I would look is the county court records where they lived in 1820. And I would look, you want to see when they actually got that military bounty land in the Finger Lakes region of New York. What a joyful place that is. And then look in the court records for that year, because maybe the court records will tell you something about the service. You also want to look in the pensions of other people. Go to Fold 3, look at pensions, and try to find that person's name and other people's pensions, because you may learn of their service that way.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad Bob had that follow-up to give you more information so you could help him better. Ready for the next question?
Of course.
How can I distinguish between people with the same name who lived during the Revolutionary War period?
When a Filipina gets married, after the marriage, she has a reception. She's wearing a white dress. As she dances around the hall, people pin pesos to her dress. Pesos are not like American bills, they're very colored. So when the dance is all over with, her dress looks as no other dress does. So what you want to do is, instead of pinning pesos to your ancestors, you want to pin records to your ancestors so that your records look unique. So you may have 5 people of the same name. You want to attempt to identify children associated with that man, wives associated with that man, land associated with that man, probate associated with that land, with that man, so that each one of those men, based on age, based on spouse, based on location, based on what they own and what they don't own, look different than any other man of the same name. What church did they go to? Because you may have 3 John Smiths, and one's in Maryland, one's an Anglican, one's a Baptist, and one's a Quaker.
Mm-hmm.
And don't tell me Quakers didn't serve, because my 5th great grandfather, Woodson Parsons, in the 1st Virginia Regiment, got thrown out of the Quakers for serving.
Yeah. So you're finding those distinguishing factors to make them unique.
Right. You want to do what I call the peso dance. And you should do the peso dance with, if you're a hatch, match, and dispatch person,
Mm-hmm.
you have a skeleton for an ancestor. I like my ancestors to be fat, so I want to know about them. I want them to know, I want to be able to attach as many things to them. Everything basically has a person, a place, and a time. And 2 people cannot occupy the exact same space at the same time. They can be side by side, but they can't and be father and son or uncle and nephew or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't occupy the same space.
Very good suggestions and advice there. We have next question. Could my ancestor have supported the British side, and how would I find those records?
So I have the best thing to do is I have 2 talks on loyalists on legacy. How to research a loyalist soldier during the war, and how to research a loyalist who stayed in the United States after the war.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called Loyalist the Reintegration.
Mm-hmm.
Only about 10% of the loyalists actually left.
Hmm.
And generally they were officers of
Mm-hmm.
loyalist units, or they were much too well known for their loyalist sympathies to be able to hide under the radar. And many of them abandoned their wives and children because they couldn't afford to take them to Florida, the Caribbean, London, or Ontario, or Quebec.
Uh-huh.
So, and they may come back. It's often that these people do come back. It's often that these families will lose their property, and then their property will be given back to them.
Oh, wow.
So, it's called confiscation.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing you do is take a look at those 2 talks, and then if you have questions, send me an email. But recognize, in Maryland, it's tough. In Virginia, it's tough, because Maryland and Virginia push these people out of the state. You want to be careful in Maryland, because when you look at oaths of allegiance, you want to make sure it's an oath of allegiance to the state and not an oath of allegiance to George III, because in Maryland, both kinds of lists exist.
Oh, okay. Okay. Again, so many little nuances there that you know about. We appreciate
Which can't
sharing.
be, which I'm glad for the questions, because they can't be covered in an hour.
No.
Like I said, there's 5 talks on what I gave you tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
5 hours jammed into 1 hour.
Yeah. So we really appreciate those questions, because it breaks down all those,
Right.
those little
Okay.
pieces. So the next question is, so revolutionary soldiers are born prior to 1745. So being born in 1783 is too late of a birth year to qualify.
Yeah, no kidding. But if you think you've got a Revolutionary War soldier born in 1783, you want to look, and you don't know his father, you want to look for a person of that name
Right.
as a Revolutionary War soldier, and then find him in the DAR or whatever, and see who his children are, and is that your guy a child
Yeah.
of that guy, or
Goes
is he a
back to the
nephew?
same 2 names. that you
So,
just
yeah.
answered, right?
So what I didn't talk about in regards to DAR, there's the ancestor side, which I did talk about. I didn't talk about the descendant side. There are 5 places that I always plug all of my ancestors in if it's time frame appropriate. And I always add anybody who is born after 1717, actually, even up to 1940, I'm going to put them in DAR descendant search to see if anybody connects to anybody in that descendant search. So I had an ancestor in Orange County, Virginia. His name was Henry Ball. He had a daughter named Mahudla. So I find in the descendant search a Henry Ball who has a daughter, Mahudla. He takes Henry, who I don't know anything about except he's born about 1810. I don't know who his father is. I think I know his father now, but what I do find is his wife through the DAR, Susanna Atkins, who takes me back 3 more generations. So I'm adding Atkins, Burgess, and a couple other names, and a guy who's born in 1730, who's too old to serve, but he's providing support to the revolution. So people under him are eligible to serve. And I've added more to my genealogy. I only use the DAR as clues, but I use everything as clues because I'm always looking for original records.
Mm-hmm.
And the original records, truly, without support from others, are truly clues also. You can't have a record can't stand by itself. It
Right.
has to have supporting documentation
Yeah.
from other records that were not created by that record. Because 25 people say the birth date was, or the marriage date was 10 October 1790, and one says 10 October 1793. When it comes to Nancy Wheeler, what's the correct one?
Right.
The one that's 25, they may all be based on the same record.
Which may be false.
Exactly.
Next question I have for you. What are the biggest challenges or common mistakes people make when researching Revolutionary War ancestors?
Oh, that's easy. They stop too soon.
Ah, that's not what I thought you were going to say.
Well, I don't know what you thought. Okay, tell me what you thought. I was
No, no,
going
no,
to
no,
say.
no, no. You're the
No, no,
expert.
no, no, because I can elaborate on that also. But
No,
I mean,
you're
but
fine.
the problem is most people have never touched a pension ledger.
Mhm.
Most people have never looked at a last payment. Most people have not gone to the Bureau of Land Management and looked at the bounty land files. Most people have looked at compiled military service records first, and then the mistake they made was they thought it was their guy and it wasn't their guy, and they get to the pension and they stop with the pension research. So if you're just doing compiled military service and pension research, you've stopped too soon.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole you can use that pension ledger like a census. In that, with a census, say a guy lives in Virginia and he moves to Kentucky, or a guy lives in Maryland, moves to Ohio, and he moves to Ohio he's a Revolutionary War pensioner paid under the Act of 1818, and he moves to Ohio sometime between 1820 and 1830, or 1830 and 1840. You don't know when he moved because people don't immediately buy land if they buy land at all. So, and he probably scopes it out for a while, but you know that he's not going to come all the way back to Baltimore to pick up his pension. He's probably going to go to Wheeling. So he's going to probably transfer his pension from Baltimore to Wheeling. And when he does that, you know when he moved.
Then you got him.
Then you got him.
The next question is about the Carlisle site. Somebody said there wasn't a link in the handout. So is there, can you offer what the link is for the Carlisle site?
That's what's going to take you to the PDF for the Wright book on the Continental Army, which is in my bookcase.
And it says, the second part of the question was, is that what you were saying can be found full free?
No, this book cannot be found in full 3. It's only found at Carlisle.
Okay.
There is another, you'll find this there's a set of books which I didn't talk about from the DAR called in the a state in the Revolutionary War. These are see how thick this is?
Yeah, I
Eric
see.
Gardner was a DAR librarian. These are absolutely excellent. I honestly, I don't know whether I have one. I don't have one for Maryland here, but in my 30th bookcase, I might have one. I don't remember whether there is one for Maryland or not off the top of my head.
Okay.
And then for those who care, the Revolutionary War Bounty Land book is right here.
Mm-hmm. Very good. This is a specific question about one of the slides. Where to find final payments, RG 217 entry
722. You
722.
find them in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., but they are currently closed. So you want to look at the pension ledger and identify the pension payments other than that last one and order those.
Mhm.
Because especially if it's a last payment, if it's a final payment, the final payment is going to have heirs
Mhm.
because they're coming in after the death of the soldier. But that last payment is not going to be that much different than the previous pension payments.
Okay.
So you want to look at that. You want to look at some of those, and you can't order those by name. You have to order those by act and by quarter, year and quarter.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. And that's a joy because I remember looking in Vincent's agency in Indiana, Posey County, that area. And I'm looking for a guy who's due back pay, regular soldier by the name of James Hamilton. And I'm just leafing through it. And all of a sudden I come across this guy, Samuel T. Scott. Remember my third great grandfather?
Yeah.
He's in the file, okay, in the box. And if they just would have given me James Hamilton, I never would have gotten Samuel T. I'm going to have to go and get it again because in my thousands of records, and that's before iPhones, in my thousands of records, I don't know where it is. So I have to go and get it. Just haven't got there yet. It's on my list.
Another question that came up, what is the best way to identify the female children of patriots to connect lineage to the patriot? Daughter relationship using records you discussed tonight.
Okay, first of all, you need to find out, do we have diaries? Do we have diaries in the neighborhood? These women got together and they sewed bandages, they did they quilted, they made clothes, they did all kinds of things in support of the cause. So you want to find somebody talking about it and who the people are. For example, in Edenton, North Carolina, you know, there wasn't one Tea Party. There were Tea Parties in every colony, and the one in North Carolina was in Edenton, and these were all women. So that's one of the pieces. You need to be able to find the marriage, and if she's a widow, she's telling you about her marriage. She in the pension, she has to tell you about the marriage,
right?
And that she's not remarried. So that's easy if there is a pension. You have to ask the question, how far is, first you ask yourself the question, does the man have a horse? The next question you have to ask is, how far will that man walk to get a wife? So, and the next question you have to ask is, did he meet her at church? And then you have to pray she's not Baptist or Methodist because they don't have records. You always want to pray for a Quaker because they always have records, but Baptists and Methodists just don't believe in records. At least not till much later. But you may, I think I have a talk on finding females on Just Genealogy, because I used to teach finding females at IGHR in the Advanced Methodology course for a few years.
So we might have to have you back.
Huh?
We might have to have you back.
Yeah, well, I'm more than welcome to come.
That would be great.
You know, I like talking.
And the audience is really engaged. We have a couple more questions to hit.
Sure.
So my ancestor was described as a private and an associator in New York County militia. Would he have a pension?
An associator in York County or New York County or New
In
York?
York County.
York County. Okay. An associator is a person who signs a list that he's in favor of it all. So that'll get you in the DAR, but that won't get you a pension.
No, okay. Very good.
The only way that you can get a pension is if you serve. And if you hire a substitute, which you could do, it's the substitute who gets the pension, not you. But if you hired a substitute and paid the money, you would be eligible for DAR, as would the person who substituted, because you did that in support of the cause.
Yeah.
I think that's the case. I hope I'm not wrong. And many times you find this, that it's the father who sends the son or something like that.
Yeah. Somebody wanted to know if they could come study in your office.
I haven't thought about an internship, but just be in touch. Actually, I live in my warehouse, and my warehouse is not the most pleasant set of places, but it's surrounded by books.
Yeah.
So it's a happy place for me.
Yeah, dream come true for many of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dream come. This is why I do it, is because this allows me to be around books.
Yeah, we can appreciate that. Had a couple of questions about that discount code, and is the code for heritagebooks.com?
It's for heritagebooks.com.
And say the discount code one more time.
Oh, is it MGS MPT? Somebody was supposed to write it down. I asked.
Maybe they're the ones who are asking the question.
Okay, give
I
me
don't know.
just a
I'm just going
second.
through the
It
answers.
is. I'll go. Oh, it's MGS MPT, and that will give you a 20% discount for about 30 days. For as
Okay.
long as the video is up, the discount will be.
Oh, very good. We appreciate that. The last question really is just a comment, and that is to meet with a DAR registrar saying that they will assist you. And that's like a perfect segue because that's our next program that we're going to have. So I do want to say we really thank you for presenting this evening. This was really fascinating. So much information, so much engagement from the audience. We really appreciated all of it. And all those little nuances and little nuggets you gave us at the end with the questions, that was just added to the program. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the first of two special America 250 virtual genealogy programs that we're putting on this summer that will aid you in finding your American Revolution patriot. So registration is open for the second program this summer, which is how DAR can help search for your Revolutionary War patriot. And that's going to be held on Tuesday, July the 14th. Same time, 6:30, and you can go on our website and register for that. And as I said earlier, the performance is recorded and it's going to be available with that handout at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page for the next 4 weeks. Anything you want to say in closing before we head out?
Don't forget that you've got my email, sierrascott@heritagebooks.com. I don't do research for anybody, but I consult. And, if it takes 5 minutes to do, you'll get an answer very quickly.
Yep. And again, so many kudos in our comments. If you can't see them, lots of happy faces, star faces, hearts. People are saying it's amazing. So we're really, really appreciative that you came with us this evening. So, and to our audience, please take time to complete that quick survey after the credits. We use your input to choose topics for our virtual genealogy programs like the one you just saw. And it's time well spent. Just takes a minute. So we really appreciate if you do that for us. So thank you all. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks again, Craig, for coming in with us.
Thank you.
Good night, all.